The arena on Prime held 1 million beings. They came from every corner of the galaxy. They came to watch blood. They came to watch glory. Most of all, they came to watch Eth, the supreme fighter, destroy his enemies. Eth was not like other warriors. He stood 3 meters tall. His skin was like dark iron. 4 arms hung from his massive body, each one thick with muscle that could crush stone. His people, they were born for combat, but even among them Eth was special. He had won 500 fights in the grand arena. He had never lost. He had never even been wounded badly enough to leave a scar. The galaxy called him the supreme fighter. Some called him a god of battle. Others simply called him death. On this day the arena was full. The noise was like thunder that never stopped. Beings of all shapes and sizes screamed and roared. They waved banners. They bet fortunes. They waited for blood. In the center of the arena, Eth stood alone. He did not move. He did not need to show off. Everyone knew what he was. Everyone knew what he could do. Far above, in the cheap seats where the poor and the weak sat, a human watched. His name was. He was 32 years old. He had brown hair, brown eyes, and a body that was neither strong nor weak. He was simply average in every way that could be measured. Had come to Prime 3 months ago. He worked as a cargo loader at the spaceport. It was hard work for little pay, but it was honest work, and that mattered to him. He had saved money for 6 months just to buy a ticket to the grand arena. He wanted to see the supreme fighter with his own eyes. Humans were new to the galactic stage. They had only made contact with alien life 50 years ago. In that time, they had learned many hard lessons. The galaxy was not kind. The galaxy was not fair. Strength was what mattered. Power was what commanded respect. And humans had neither. They were small. They were weak. They lived short lives. They could not breathe in many atmospheres. They could not survive extreme temperatures. 100 different species looked at humans and saw nothing worth respecting. Knew this, every human knew this. But still they pushed forward. They traded. They worked. They survived. That was what humans did. They survived. The crowd roared as the gates on the far side of the arena opened, leaned forward in his seat. The opponent was coming. It was a reptile creature from the outer rim. The stood 2.5 meters tall. Its scales were green and black. Its teeth were like knives. It carried 2 swords, each one longer than was tall. There was a famous warrior. It had killed dozens in the arena. It was fast and smart and cruel. The crowd cheered for it. Many had bet on it to finally defeat Eth. Watched as the 2 fighters faced each other. The roared and beat its chest. Eth did nothing. He simply waited. The bell rang. The fight began. It lasted 11 seconds. Eth moved like water. His 4 arms became a blur. The first blow broke both of the swords. The second blow shattered its ribs. The third blow ended its life. The crowd went silent for a moment. Then they screamed with joy. Eth stood over his dead enemy and did not even look down. He had won again. It meant nothing to him. It was simply what he did. Sat back in his seat. His heart was beating fast. He had never seen anything like that. The power, the speed, the complete control, it was like watching a force of nature. As Eth walked toward the exit, something strange happened. A small creature ran onto the arena floor. It was a child, a young with blue skin and large eyes. The child was crying. It ran toward Eth, screaming words that could not hear. Guards rushed forward to stop the child. But before they could reach it, something else happened. The floor of the arena exploded. Did not understand what was happening at first. There was fire and smoke and screaming. The explosion had come from below, from the tunnels under the arena. More explosions followed. The walls of the arena began to crack. It was an attack. Someone was attacking the grand arena. Armed figures poured from the tunnels. They wore black armor and carried plasma weapons. They moved with military precision, cutting down anyone in their path. Saw guards fall. He saw innocent beings die. He saw chaos spread like a disease. In the center of the arena, Eth did not run. He turned to face the attackers. Even without weapons, he was ready to fight. But the attackers were not interested in fighting him. They were after something else. Saw it before anyone else did. While the main force attacked the arena, a smaller group moved toward the child who had run onto the floor. They wanted the child. Did not think, he did not plan, he simply moved. He jumped from his seat and began to run down the stairs. People screamed at him, people pushed him, but he kept moving. He had to reach the floor, he had to reach the child. He did not know why he was doing this. He was weak, he was small, he had no weapons, he had no training. Against these attackers he would die in seconds. But the child was crying. The child was alone and could not look away from that. He reached the arena floor just as the attackers closed in on the child. There were 5 of them. They were tall and strong and armed. They saw and laughed. One of them raised a weapon and fired. Threw himself to the side. The plasma bolt missed him by centimeters. He felt the heat burn his skin, but he kept moving. He grabbed the child and ran. He did not get far. A second attacker blocked his path. A third grabbed him from behind. A fourth tore the child from his arms. Fought, he punched and kicked and bit. He fought with every bit of strength in his weak human body. He knew he could not win. He knew he was going to die, but he fought anyway. Because that was what humans did. The attacker raised a blade to kill him, closed his eyes and waited for the end. But the end did not come. Instead, he heard a sound like thunder. He opened his eyes and saw Eth standing before him. The Supreme Fighter had crossed the entire arena in seconds. His 4 arms moved too fast to see. The attackers fell like leaves in a storm. In moments, all 5 attackers were dead. Eth stood over their bodies, not even breathing hard. He looked down with eyes that were black and deep like space itself. Stared back, he was bleeding, he was terrified, but he did not look away. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The sounds of battle continued around them. Fire burned, people screamed, but in that small space there was only silence. Then Eth did something that no one expected. He reached down with one of his massive hands and lifted to his feet, gently, carefully, like handling something precious. The Supreme Fighter spoke. His voice was like mountains crashing together. "You are brave," he said. "Why?" Did not know what to say. He looked at the child, who was crying in his arms again. He had somehow gotten the child back during the chaos. Someone had to help, said. No one else was going to. Eth stared at him for a long time. Then slowly, the Supreme Fighter nodded. "Yes," he said, "someone had to." And in that moment, something changed between them. Something that would change the galaxy forever. The attack on the Grand Arena was stopped within the hour. The attackers were a terrorist group called the Black Flame. They had planned to kidnap the child because her father was a wealthy merchant who had refused to pay them protection money. But the attack had failed. The child was safe, and the story of what had happened spread across the galaxy like wildfire. A human had tried to save the child. A weak, small, insignificant human had run into danger while others ran away. He had fought against impossible odds. He had refused to give up. And Eth, the Supreme Fighter, had saved him. Did not want attention. He did not want fame. He just wanted to go back to his job loading cargo and live his quiet life. But the galaxy would not let him. News reporters came to the spaceport where he worked. They asked him questions. They took pictures. They made him tell the story over and over again, answered them politely, but he did not enjoy it. He had not done anything special. He had just done what felt right. But to the galaxy, what he had done was very special indeed. 3 days after the attack, received a message. It came through official channels, delivered by a soldier in full ceremonial armor. The message was simple. Eth wanted to see him. Was afraid. He had heard stories about the Supreme Fighter. Eth did not make friends. He did not show kindness. He fought and he killed and he moved on. Why would such a being want to see a cargo loader from Earth? But could not refuse. When the Supreme Fighter called, you answered. The soldier took him to Eth's private compound outside the city. It was a massive structure, more fortress than home. Guards stood at every entrance. Weapons pointed in every direction. Felt very small and very fragile as he walked through the gates. Eth was waiting in a training room. He was fighting holographic enemies, moving with speed and power that made dizzy just to watch. When he saw Enter, he stopped the simulation and turned to face him. "You came," Eth said. "You asked," replied. The Supreme Fighter studied him with those deep black eyes, forced himself not to look away. He did not know why that felt important, but it did. "Tell me about your people," Eth said. Blinked, "My people. Humans, I want to know about humans." Did not understand. The galaxy knew about humans. They were weak. They were short-lived. They were nothing special. What more was there to say? But Eth was waiting, so tried to answer. "We are from a small planet called Earth," he said. "We are young compared to most species. We are not very strong or fast. We cannot do many things that other species can do." "And yet you ran into danger," Eth said. "Why?" "I told you before, someone had to help." "But why you? You could not win. You knew you could not win. Why did you fight?" Thought about the question. He thought about his father, who had worked 2 jobs to feed his family. He thought about his mother, who had fought cancer for 5 years before dying with a smile on her face. He thought about all the humans he had known who had faced impossible odds and refused to give up. "Because giving up is worse than losing," he said finally. "Because trying is better than doing nothing. Because hope matters, even when there is no reason to hope." Eth was silent for a long time. His 4 arms hung at his sides. His massive body was perfectly still. "My people respect strength," he said at last. "We respect power. We look at a being and we measure them by what they can do. By this measure, humans are nothing." Nodded. He had heard this before. He had heard it many times. "But there are other kinds of strength," Eth continued. "Strength that cannot be measured. Strength that does not show itself in muscle or speed. I have fought for 300 years. I have killed thousands. I have never lost, but I have never done what you did." "What do you mean?" "I have never run toward danger to save a stranger. I have never fought when I knew I could not win. I have never put another life above my own." Eth paused. "This is a weakness in my people, a weakness I did not see until I watched you." Did not know what to say. He had never thought of his actions as anything special. He had just done what any decent person would do, what any human would do. But maybe that was the point. "Your people are new to the galaxy," Eth said. "They are small and weak and easy to dismiss, but they have something that many powerful species have lost. They have heart." He stepped closer to. Even though new Eth would not hurt him, he felt fear. The Supreme Fighter's presence was overwhelming. It was like standing next to a star. "I want to understand this," Eth said. "I want to learn what your people know. Will you teach me?" Stared at him. "You want me to teach you?" "Yes." "I am just a cargo loader. I am nobody. I do not know anything." "You know how to hope," Eth said. "You know how to fight when you cannot win. You know how to put others before yourself. These are things I do not know. These are things I want to learn." Thought about it. He thought about his quiet life, his simple job, his small dreams. He thought about the chance to do something more, to be something more. "Okay," he said, "I will try." And so began the strangest partnership the galaxy had ever seen. For the next 3 months spent every day with Eth. He did not teach fighting. He did not teach strategy. He taught humanity. He told stories about Earth, stories about wars and peace, hatred and love, failure and triumph. He talked about the human spirit, that stubborn force that made people keep going even when everything was against them. He talked about kindness and compassion and the simple joy of helping others. Eth listened to everything. He asked questions. He thought deeply. Sometimes he disagreed and they would argue for hours, but mostly he listened and could see something changing in those black eyes. The Supreme Fighter was learning something new, something that 300 years of combat had never taught him. Word spread about their strange friendship. Some people laughed. A human teaching the Supreme Fighter, it was absurd, it was ridiculous, it was impossible. But others watched with interest, because something was changing in Eth, something everyone could see. He still fought in the arena, he still won every battle, but now when his opponents were beaten, he offered them mercy. When the crowd called for blood, he refused to kill unless necessary. When young fighters approached him for guidance, he gave it freely. The Supreme Fighter was becoming something more than a killer. He was becoming a leader, and everyone could see that the little human had something to do with it. Some people did not like this change. Some people thought it made Eth weak. Some people decided to do something about it. On the first day of the 4th month, assassins came to Eth's compound. They came at night when the guards were tired. They came with weapons designed to kill. They came with a plan that should have worked. But they made one mistake they did not account for. Could not sleep that night. He had a feeling something was wrong, a tingling at the back of his neck that would not go away. He walked through the compound, checking doors and windows. He told himself he was being foolish. Eth had hundreds of guards. Nothing could get through. But then he saw them, dark shapes moving across the courtyard, silent and fast, professional. Ran to warn the guards, but it was too late. The assassins had already disabled the security systems. The guards were unconscious or dead. Knew he should hide. He knew he should let Eth handle this. The Supreme Fighter had killed thousands. He did not need help from a weak human. But did not hide. Instead, he ran to Eth's sleeping chambers, shouting a warning at the top of his lungs. The assassins heard him. They changed course, moving to silence him first, ran harder. He ran faster than he had ever run in his life. He reached Eth's door just as the first assassin caught up to him, turned and fought. He had no weapons. He had no training. He had no chance. But he fought anyway. He fought for 20 seconds. 20 seconds of pain and blood and desperate struggle. 20 seconds that gave Eth time to wake up. When the Supreme Fighter opened his door, he saw on the ground, bleeding from a dozen wounds. He saw assassins standing over him with blades raised. He saw the weak little human who had tried once again to protect someone else. And Eth felt something he had not felt in 300 years. Rage. The assassins never had a chance. Eth killed them all in seconds. His 4 arms became instruments of destruction, tearing through armor and flesh and bone. He did not speak. He did not roar. He simply killed, and when it was done, 15 assassins lay dead at his feet. Then he turned too. The human was badly hurt. Blood pooled beneath him. His breathing was shallow. His eyes were starting to close. Eth lifted him gently, as carefully as he had lifted him in the arena months before. He carried to the medical bay himself, refusing to let anyone else touch him. He stayed while the doctors worked, his massive form completely still, his black eyes never looking away. For 3 days floated between life and death. For 3 days Eth did not leave his side. He did not eat. He did not sleep. He simply waited. The galaxy watched in disbelief. The Supreme Fighter, the deadliest being alive, was keeping vigil over a dying human. News reports talked of nothing else. Philosophers debated what it meant. Cynics said it was a trick. But those who saw Eth's face knew the truth. This was real. This was something new. On the 4th day, opened his eyes. He saw Eth sitting beside his bed, and for a moment he thought he was dreaming. But then the pain hit him, and he knew he was awake. "You are alive," Eth said. His voice was soft, softer than had ever heard it. "Yes," replied. His throat was dry, it hurt to speak. "What happened?" "You saved my life." Tried to remember, the dark shapes, the running, the fighting. It came back slowly in pieces. "I did not save anything," he said. "You killed them all." "I killed them because you warned me. Without your warning, they would have reached me while I slept. They would have succeeded." Eth leaned forward. "You could not fight them, you could not stop them, but you ran toward danger anyway. You gave me time. You saved my life." Did not know what to say. He had not thought about it. He had just acted. "That is what humans do," Eth continued. "You told me this. You told me about hope and heart and putting others first. I listened. I learned. But I did not understand. Not truly. Not until I saw you lying on the ground dying to protect me." The Supreme Fighter stood. His massive form filled the room. His presence was overwhelming, but for the first time did not feel fear. He felt something else, something like family. "My people have a tradition," Eth said. "When a warrior saves another warrior's life through courage and sacrifice, a bond is formed. A bond stronger than blood, stronger than duty, stronger than death." He reached into a pouch at his belt and pulled out a small stone. It was black and smooth, with symbols carved into its surface. It glowed faintly with inner light. "This is a kin stone," Eth said. "To give this to another is the highest honor it can bestow. It says that two beings are bonded forever, that they are family, that they are one." Stared at the stone. His heart was beating fast. "This has never been given to a non," Eth continued. "It has never been given to someone weak. It has never been given to someone small." He paused. "But you are not weak. You are not small. You are stronger than anyone I have ever known." He placed the stone in his hand. It was warm against his skin. "Of Earth," Eth said, his voice ringing with ancient power, "I name you kin. I name you brother. From this day until the end of time, we are one. My honor is your honor. My enemies are your enemies. My life is your life." The words echoed through the room. They echoed through the compound. They echoed somehow through the entire galaxy. The Supreme Fighter had named a human kin. The news spread instantly. Every world, every station, every ship in the galaxy heard the announcement. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Some people could not believe it. A human, a weak, short-lived, insignificant human. It was impossible, it was insulting, it was an outrage. But others saw it differently. Others saw what Eth had seen. They saw a being who ran toward danger instead of away. They saw a being who fought when he could not win. They saw a being who put others before himself, again and again, without asking for anything in return. Maybe humans were not so weak after all. Maybe there were different kinds of strength. The council demanded an explanation. Eth appeared before them at his side and told them the truth. He told them about the arena. He told them about the lessons. He told them about the assassination attempt. The council listened in silence. When Eth finished, they deliberated for 3 hours. In the end, they accepted his decision. The kin bond was sacred. It could not be broken. If Eth had named a human kin, then a human was kin. But not everyone was happy with this decision. Some saw it as a betrayal of their traditions. Some saw it as a sign of weakness. Some decided that had to die. They did not attack immediately. They were smarter than the assassins had been. They knew they could not defeat Eth directly, so they waited, they watched, they planned. And while they planned, his life changed completely. He was no longer a cargo loader. He was no longer a nobody. He was the kin of the Supreme Fighter, and that title carried weight throughout the galaxy. Leaders wanted to meet him. Merchants wanted to trade with him. Soldiers wanted to learn from him. The small, weak human who had run into danger to save a child had become one of the most important beings in the galaxy. But did not let it change him. He still wore simple clothes. He still spoke simply. He still treated everyone with the same respect, whether they were emperors or servants. "This is why you are strong," Eth told him one day. "Power changes most beings. It makes them arrogant. It makes them cruel. But you remain the same. You remain human." Smiled. "We are very stubborn," he said. Yes, Eth agreed, and that stubbornness is your greatest weapon. They had become true friends by now, true brothers. They trained together, ate together, talked together for hours. Eth taught about combat and strategy, taught Eth about compassion and patience. They were different in every way that could be measured. One was huge, the other small. One was strong, the other weak. One lived for centuries, the other for decades. But none of that mattered, they were kin. 6 months after the kin bond was announced, received a message from Earth. The leaders of humanity wanted to meet with Eth. They wanted to discuss a formal alliance between humans and the. This was huge. They were one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. An alliance with them would change humanity's position forever. Brought the message to Eth. The Supreme Fighter read it carefully, then nodded. "We will go to Earth," he said. "I will meet your people." Felt a strange mix of emotions. Pride, hope, fear. He wanted Eth to see the best of humanity, but he knew the Supreme Fighter would also see the worst. The violence, the inequality, the endless struggle between good and evil. "We are not perfect," said. "We have many problems." "All species have problems," Eth replied. "What matters is how you face them." And so, for the first time in history, the Supreme Fighter traveled to Earth. Earth was nothing like Eth had expected. He had seen the reports. He had studied the data, but none of it had prepared him for the reality of this small blue world. It was crowded. Billions of humans lived on a planet that some species would consider barely habitable. They built cities that reached to the sky. They dug tunnels that went deep into the ground. They covered every piece of land with life and activity. It was chaotic. Hundreds of nations existed on one planet, each with its own laws and customs. They fought with each other. They traded with each other. They helped each other and hurt each other in equal measure. And it was beautiful. Mountains and oceans, forests and deserts, life in every corner. Humans had not destroyed their world as many species had. They had changed it, yes. They had damaged it, but they had also protected it. They were trying to save it. Eth saw all of this and understood something important. Humans were not weak. They were new. They were young. They were still learning, but they had potential that most species had lost long ago. They had hope. The leaders of Earth met Eth in a great hall in a city called Geneva. They were nervous. Eth could see it in their eyes, in the way they moved, in the words they chose. They feared him. But they also respected him. They had seen what he had done for. They had heard the stories. They knew that the Supreme Fighter was not just a killer. "We are honored by your visit," the leader of the gathering said. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. "We hope this is the beginning of a long friendship between our peoples." Eth looked at the gathered humans. There were hundreds of them, representatives from every nation on Earth. They were different colors, different sizes, different in ways he could not understand, but they were all watching him with the same expression. "Hope. I came to Earth for one reason," Eth said. His voice filled the hall. "I came to understand why is the way he is. I came to understand humans." He paused. The hall was completely silent. "I have seen many things in my time here. I have seen your wars and your peace, your hatred and your love, your failures and your triumphs. I have seen the best and worst of your species." The humans waited. They did not know where this was going. "And I have decided," Eth continued, "that humanity is worthy of respect." There was a collective exhale, relief, joy, hope fulfilled. "You are not strong like the, you are not fast like the, you are not wise like the, but you have something that many species have forgotten. You have heart. You have spirit. You have the courage to face impossible odds and refuse to give up." He turned to who was standing beside him. "This human taught me these things. He showed me that strength is not just about power. It is about what you do with power. It is about protecting the weak. It is about fighting for what is right. It is about putting others before yourself." Eth raised one of his massive arms. In his hand, he held a symbol of a badge that represented their highest rank. I have spoken with the council. I have told them what I have learned, and they have agreed to extend to humanity an offer of alliance, not as servants, not as followers, as equals. The hall erupted in noise. People cheered, people cried, people embraced each other. This was beyond anything they had hoped for. This was history. But not everyone was celebrating. Far from Earth, in the dark spaces between stars, enemies were gathering. The Syndicate, a criminal organization that controlled half the galaxy's illegal trade, had been watching Eth for years. They feared him. They hated him. And now they saw a chance to destroy him. Was the key, the weak human that the Supreme Fighter loved. If they could capture, they could control Eth. They could force him to do what they wanted. They sent their best hunters. They sent their deadliest assassins. They sent an army. The attack came 3 days after the alliance was announced, was on a transport ship, traveling back to space with Eth. The ship was protected by a fleet of warships, but the Syndicate had planned carefully. They struck from everywhere at once. Ships appeared from hyperspace, surrounding the fleet. Soldiers boarded the transport, cutting through the defenses with brutal efficiency. Was separated from Eth in the first minutes of the attack. He found himself alone in a corridor, with enemies closing in from both sides. He had no weapons. He had no armor. He had nothing but his human body and his human spirit. But that was enough. He ducked through doors and crawled through vents. He used every trick he knew, every instinct he had developed in months of training with Eth. He was not trying to escape. He was trying to find his brother. Along the way, he gathered survivors, crew members who had been trapped, soldiers who had been separated from their units. One by one, he found them and led them to safety. "Follow me," he said again and again. "Stay together, we will get through this." They believed him, not because he was strong, not because he was powerful, but because he was calm, because he was certain, because he refused to give up. By the time reached Eth, he had 30 people behind him. They had fought through a dozen enemy squads. They had sealed off corridors and created traps. They had done the impossible. Eth was in the center of the ship, surrounded by enemies. But he was not fighting. He was standing still, his 4 arms raised in surrender. Understood immediately. They had threatened to kill the hostages. They had threatened to destroy the ship. Eth had stopped fighting to save innocent lives. The leader of the enemy force was a tall creature with gray skin and cold eyes. He was smiling. "The Supreme Fighter," he said, "brought low by his love for a weak human, how fitting." Stepped forward. The enemies saw him and laughed. What could one small human do against an army? "Let him go," said. His voice was steady. "Or what?" the leader asked. "What will you do, little human?" Looked at Eth. The Supreme Fighter's eyes met his, and in that moment they understood each other completely. "I will show you what humans can do," said. And then he attacked. It was not a fight. It was a distraction. Threw himself at the enemy leader, knowing he would be captured, knowing he would be hurt. But he also knew that Eth would never let him die. The moment the enemies focused on, Eth moved. His 4 arms became a storm of destruction. The 30 survivors that had gathered charged forward, and the enemies, caught off guard, began to fall. The battle lasted 7 minutes. When it was over, lay on the floor bleeding again, but he was smiling. "You are insane," Eth said, kneeling beside him. "I learned from the best," replied. The Supreme Fighter laughed. It was a sound that no one had ever heard before, deep and rich and full of joy. "Yes," he said. "Yes, you did." The defeat of the Syndicate attack was the beginning of the end for the criminal organization. With their best forces destroyed and their plans exposed, they became hunted across the galaxy. Within a year, they were broken. But more importantly, the attack had changed how the galaxy saw humanity. The story spread far and wide. A human had led survivors through an enemy army. A human had attacked an enemy leader with his bare hands. A human had fought beside the supreme fighter and helped him win. These were not the actions of a weak species. These were not the actions of beings who deserved to be dismissed. Human ambassadors found doors opening that had been closed before. Human traders found partners who had never considered working with them. Human explorers found welcomes where they had once found only scorn. The galaxy was starting to understand what Eth had already learned. Humans were different. Humans were special. Humans had something that could not be measured in strength or speed or... They had heart. Recovered from his wounds slowly. He spent 3 months in a medical facility, healing from injuries that would have killed most beings. But he never complained. He never gave up. He simply kept fighting just as he always did. When he was finally well enough to leave, Eth came to take him home. Home asked, "Where is home now?" It was a good question. He had left Earth months ago. He had become kin to an alien warrior. He had helped change the course of galactic history. Where did someone like him belong? Home is where your family is, Eth said, and your family is wherever I am. Smiled. It was strange, this friendship between them. Strange and wonderful and impossible. A human and a brothers forever. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. They traveled together for the next several years. They visited worlds and met leaders. They fought battles and made peace. They showed the galaxy what it meant to be kin. And everywhere they went, taught the same lessons he had taught Eth. He talked about hope and courage and putting others first. He told stories about humanity, about their struggles and their triumphs. He showed beings across the galaxy that strength came in many forms. Some listened, some changed, some became better. And slowly, the galaxy itself began to change. Wars that had lasted centuries came to ends. Species that had been enemies for generations found common ground. The idea that might makes right, that power is all that matters, began to fade. New ideas took its place. Ideas about cooperation, about compassion, about hope. Not everyone accepted these changes. Some species clung to the old ways. Some leaders refused to adapt. There were still conflicts. There were still problems. But the direction was clear. The galaxy was moving toward something better. 10 years after had first arrived on Prime, he returned to the grand arena. It was the anniversary of the day he had tried to save that child. The day his life had changed forever. The arena had been rebuilt. It was bigger now, more beautiful. But it was also different. The fights were still fierce, but they were no longer to the death. The warriors still competed, but they also respected each other. Sat in the front row this time. No more cheap seats in the back. He was the kin of the supreme fighter, and he had a place of honor. Eth was in the arena, preparing for his 550th fight. He was old now, older than any had ever been while still fighting, but he showed no signs of slowing down. His opponent was young and fast and talented. She was a warrior named, one of the best fighters of her generation. The crowd cheered for both of them. The bell rang, the fight began. It was different from the fights remembered from his first visit. There was still power and speed and skill, but there was also respect. When Eth landed a blow, he did not follow up with a killing strike. When gained an advantage, she did not press for a cruel finish. They fought for 20 minutes. They pushed each other to their limits, and in the end, Eth won. But instead of standing over his fallen opponent, he reached down and helped her to her feet. The crowd went wild. They cheered for both warriors. They celebrated the fight, not the violence. This was the new way. This was what the galaxy was becoming. After the fight, Eth came to sit beside. The two brothers watched the crowd together. "You have changed everything," said. "You have changed the galaxy." "No," Eth replied. "You changed everything, I simply helped." Shook his head. "I was just a cargo loader, I was nobody." "You were never nobody." Eth's black eyes were warm with affection. "You were always exactly what you are now, a being with a heart so strong that it could move mountains. I simply had the wisdom to see it." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the arena fill with light and celebration. "My people called you weak," Eth said finally. "They looked at your size and they saw nothing worth respecting, but they were blind. They could not see what I see." "What do you see?" "I see the future," Eth said. "I see what the galaxy will become because of humans. You will spread your ideas like seeds. You will teach others what you have taught me. You will make the universe a better place simply by being who you are." Felt tears in his eyes. Human tears, the kind that showed emotion instead of hiding it. "I am proud to be your kin," he said. "And I am proud to be yours," Eth replied. They clasped hands, the massive warrior and the small human cargo loader. Brothers, kin, family. And the galaxy revered them both. Years later, when historians wrote about this era, they called it the Great Awakening. They wrote about how the galaxy changed from a place of competition and violence to a place of cooperation and hope. They wrote about Eth, the supreme fighter who learned compassion. They wrote about humanity, the young species that taught the galaxy what it meant to be strong. But mostly, they wrote about the ordinary human who had run into danger to save a child, the weak being who had fought when he could not win, the nobody who had become somebody simply by being himself. They called him the heart of the galaxy. They said his example had inspired billions. They built statues of him on 100 worlds. But never cared about any of that. He remained simple until the end of his days. He remained humble. He remained human. And when he finally died, old and peaceful and surrounded by family, Eth was at his side. The supreme fighter held his brother's hand as he passed, and for the first time in 300 years he cried. The funeral was attended by representatives from every corner of the galaxy. Leaders and workers, warriors and peacemakers, aliens of every shape and size. They came to honor a human who had changed everything. Eth spoke at the ceremony. His voice, usually so powerful, was soft with grief. "Taught me that strength is not about power," he said. "It is about what you do with power. It is about protecting the weak and fighting for what is right. It is about putting others before yourself, even when it costs you everything." He looked out at the crowd, at all the beings who had come to pay their respects. Humans call this quality heart. They carry it in their small bodies and their short lives. They carry it like a flame that never goes out, and that flame has spread across the galaxy, lighting the darkness wherever it goes. He paused. The crowd was silent. "My brother is gone, but his light remains. His lessons remain. His hope remains. And as long as we remember him, as long as we follow his example, the galaxy will never fall back into darkness." The ceremony ended, the crowd departed, but the legend lived on. And somewhere, on a small blue planet in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy, human children heard the story of. They heard how an ordinary man had done extraordinary things. They heard how hope and courage and love had changed the universe. And they learned the most important lesson of all. That being human was not about being strong or fast or powerful. It was about having heart. It was about fighting for what was right. It was about refusing to give up, no matter how impossible the odds. This was what it meant to be human. This was why the galaxy revered them. And this was why, no matter what challenges lay ahead, humanity would always find a way to shine.